You explain your idea clearly. You provide the context, the data, the logical next steps, and yet the room stares back at you blankly. You hit an invisible wall, left with a single, exhausting thought. They just aren't hearing me. When this happens, we instinctively blame the mechanics of the conversation. We treat communication like a straight pipe. A sender packs an intent into a message, pushes it through a channel, and a receiver unpacks it on the other side. This diagram shows our basic assumption. If the message fails to arrive intact, we assume there is a leak in the pipe. We blame poor reception, bad phrasing, or static on the line. We believe the signal simply wasn't clear enough. So we try to fix the signal. We write hyper-detailed meeting scripts. We micromanage every exact syllable. We try to force perfect precision, assuming that eliminating all ambiguity will guarantee understanding. But demanding perfect transmission creates a trap. Over-explaining chokes the life out of the interaction. The harder you try to dictate exactly how someone should understand you, the more they disconnect. The problem is that human beings are not passive decoders. We process language through our own observation operators, our individual histories, habits, and contexts. Every person actively alters incoming information the moment they receive it. Think of a mother passing down a lifelong family recipe to her daughter. For decades, the dish was cooked by feel, a pinch of salt, a little less onion. But to ensure nothing is lost in translation, the mother suddenly writes down exact weights and temperatures, stripping away the intuition. The daughter follows the instructions flawlessly. The result is technically accurate according to the data, yet it tastes completely unrecognizable. The soul of the dish is gone. To transfer living knowledge, you actually need the messy, individual deviations. Forcing someone to abandon their unique way of processing information destroys the exact human contact required to understand it in the first place. If communication isn't a single straight wire, we have to view it as parallel trajectories. Ideas bounce, distort, and move dimensionally through a group of active participants. This diagram shows the true engine of knowledge production, the feedback cycle. The critical metric is not how clear your initial signal is, but how fast that signal rapidly loops back to you with a meaningful revision. This relies on a structural principle pioneered in air combat. Fighter pilots rely on the ODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. It is a continuous cycle of reading the environment and adjusting instantly. In dogfights featuring aircraft like the F-86 Sabre, survival rarely goes to the pilot with the sharpest initial observation. Victory belongs to the pilot who closes the feedback loop the fastest, forcing the opponent to react to an outdated state. This translates directly to modern teamwork. A rough 3 out of 5 draft delivered by Tuesday generates immediate feedback. A polished, perfect draft delivered on Friday leaves no room to maneuver. Speed of revision physically outpaces the need for a perfect first attempt. A fast, iterative loop corrects errors before they permanently anchor. But a fast cycle requires the right structure to run on. A group must possess role dispersion. The participants have to look at the same problem from structurally different angles. Otherwise, they will simply echo the same flawed assumptions back and forth. As the work of Daniel Kahneman and behavioral economics shows, single minds get trapped. We selectively search for data that confirms our current models, and we anchor heavily to our first hypotheses. You need external, orthogonal viewpoints to break your own mental framing. This chart plots the probability of successfully reframing a problem against the size of the group. Notice the sharp climb between 1 and 5 members. Every new person adds a distinct observation operator, mathematically increasing the chance of catching a blind spot. But look what happens when we push past 5. The curve flattens into a strict plateau. Adding more members yields rapidly diminishing returns, generating noise rather than meaningful insight. 5 people provides the exact redundancy needed for stability without causing paralysis. Grouping varied perspectives into a tight 5-person cycle isn't a recipe for communication errors. This coordinated distortion is the mathematical architecture of innovation. Which brings us back to that boardroom and the frustrating realization that someone isn't hearing you. When your intended meaning fails to land, you find yourself standing at a crossroads with 3 distinct paths. The first path is attrition. You try to force the other person to adopt your exact perception. You deploy endless arguments, new contexts, and more data, spending years trying to correct their internal model to match yours perfectly. The second path looks inward. You acknowledge that your phrasing is part of the problem, and you adjust your own framing to bridge the gap. This is highly useful, but it still has limits. Because both of these paths rely on a doomed premise. They assume that a flawless, identical copy of the idea must exist in both heads for the communication to be successful. The third path drops the demand for perfect transmission entirely. This visualization illustrates the sufficiency threshold. It accepts that the receiver's understanding will never exactly match the sender's intent. Instead of asking, "Did they decode my message perfectly?" you ask a much more practical question. Is the meaning they received sufficient for us to take the next step together? By accepting partial, sufficient understanding, ideas gain momentum. As Malcolm Gladwell has documented, ideas require a specific kind of stickiness to reach a tipping point. When people are allowed to adapt an idea to their own context, they adopt it faster and spread it wider. The growth of any team, relationship, or society does not come from erasing our cognitive differences. It comes from how rapidly and effectively we mesh these differences together. True knowledge is never a flawless photocopy of an original intent. It is a living, breathing evolution, built entirely on the friction of our distortions.